Good evening, everyone. Live from the Emerald City in Seattle, Washington, the UFO, Bigfoot, and paranormal hotspot of the Pacific Northwest, coming directly to you, listening in around the world. This, my friends, is Spaced Out Sunday, and I am your host, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer, occupying the captain's chair tonight for SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show, including all of our listeners on the digital side at Revolution Radio. And don't forget, you can always find our archive shows for free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do us all a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to some Bumblefoot, shopping at our Spaced Out Radio store, and catching up on the SOR Newswire, and so much more. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by donating to Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. And tonight, folks, we have a really hot show that we've got scheduled tonight. We have got a fantastic author and researcher by the name of Gary Wayne, who literally has written the book on the Nephilim and how giants and the secret societies in our past are potentially working together to enslave human beings. Now, that is going to be an interesting subject that we're going to get into, including a lot of other subjects as well, probably UFOs, I'm sure, and all that kind of thing. But first of all, as we always do here on Spaced Out Radio, at the top of the hour, we have our good buddy Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center, and he's going to come on, and we're going to talk about some of the hot items that have been happening in this last week as far as UFO sighting reports go. So, first of all, let me bring on Gary. Are you there?
I am, and so happy to be with you tonight, and thank you in inviting me to Spaced Out, and very much looking forward to all of the conversation that's going to happen tonight.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is going to be just wonderful. I'm looking forward to our time together. And Peter, do you happen to be available? Are you there?
I'm here. I hear you loud and clear, and I can hear Gary as well. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about giants. That's going to be a fascinating program. I'm going to tune in after I duck out and listen to it tonight. This program is ending up costing me a great deal of sleep, Michael.
Yeah, I know, because I keep calling you up, Peter, every week, and I just try to cajole you to be part of the show, and then you end up spending the rest of the show listening in from the undisclosed bunker in Eastern Washington, there where you have the National UFO Reporting Center. So, thank you for that.
You have such good and interesting guests. Tonight is no exception. That I can't resist tuning in to the program on the internet right after I leave. So
yeah. By the way, Gary, I don't know if you know this, but Peter himself is quite a Bigfoot aficionado as well, as being a UFO. A UFO file, let's put it that way, a person that's really been into this for decades. But I think it will be interesting to see if we can get into some of the correlations at all, potentially, between the, maybe biblical Nephilim and maybe this whole weird race of potential, hominids that we've got on the planet called Bigfoot. Who knows? We're gonna have a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, we can talk about that, and there's some interesting connections there, and I've done several shows on Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and there are some really interesting things there to talk about. Fantastic.
Okay, well, first of all, Peter, every time we talk at the top of the hour for Spaced Out Sunday, I think to myself, has it actually been an entire week since we spoke? Because the time that we have goes so quickly. I don't want to take up your time. Why don't I throw it to you and you tell us what you think we should know about since last week?
what I'd like to do is start with a report, actually two reports from yesteryear. This past Tuesday, Michael, I got a call from a gentleman who's a retired senior officer in the American military. He's in his 90s now, but as sharp as a tack. Had a wonderful conversation with him, and he tells an amazing story. I just received on Friday of this week his written report, which I had requested from him. But he was in 1952, he was an aviation cadet in the U.S. Air Force. And he tells a story about an incident that occurred, he believes it was in December of 1952 or possibly January of 1953. He was swept up in the draft because of the Korean conflict in the early 50s. And he tells a fascinating story, which I would like to recount to our audience tonight. He describes a flight, a qualification flight he had. He was at the end of his flight training, which lasted about a year or year and a half. And before he could get his wings, he had to complete a night instrument flight with an instructor, a cross-country flight. So he describes a flight that was of momentous importance in his life. They had to fly from Arizona up to Salt Lake City to Hill Air Force Base, and then they flew on to Nellis near Las Vegas, after which they were going to fly back to Williams Air Force Base near Mesa, Arizona. Well, he knew nothing about UFOs at this point, but they took off from Hill after a refueling stop, and he slid the hood, a piece of canvas that obscures the student pilot's view of the outside aircraft, and he was flying, headed to the Las Vegas area, when he noticed that the lights in the cockpit were coming up, and that confused him generally, but in particular because the light was white. And for night flying, you use subdued lighting, but most of all red lighting, so as to not spoil your night vision, he writes. Well, he got on the intercom to his instructor and asked why he was raising the lights. He was increasing the illumination. And the instructor pilot, a very experienced pilot, said he was not doing it, and he wanted his student pilot in the front of the aircraft to remove the canopy, or not the canopy, but remove the hood, the piece of canvas that obscured his view of the outside, and look to the right. So the student pilot, the source of this report, did exactly that, and he said he's never been so shocked to see what he witnessed at that moment. They saw a very, very large object. Both the student pilot and the instructor estimated that it was 3 times the length of a U.S. Navy battleship. That's probably 1,500 to 2,000 feet. And it looked like a blunt cigar, and on the left side, which faced them, they saw either 5 or 6 rows of what appeared to the student pilot to be portholes. But red light was radiating out of these portholes, which raises an interesting question. I'm sure some of our listeners are a step ahead of me on this. If it was radiating red light, why would it illuminate the interior of the T-33 trainer with white light? And I have no explanation for that. But that's what the report says. Fascinating report.
Oh, my.
And what it tells us, we've received a lot of publicity about the Navy intercepts of the so-called Tic Tacs, the two intercepts in 2014, I think it was,
Right.
and also 2017. You probably remember the dates, Michael, better than I.
Yeah, November 2004, and then 2015 on the East Coast as well. Yeah, the Roosevelt.
Thank you for correcting. I said 2014. 2004 off San Diego. That's correct.
Yep.
And so these sightings by military pilots apparently have been taking place for a long time. This, again, was 1952 or 1953, December or January. And it's a fascinating report, and we'll have it posted to our website in the very near future. So I thought I would like to share that to kick things off tonight.
Oh,
it's a dramatic sighting.
That's a great one to start off with. I have a million questions. I don't know that you have the answers to them. I'm sure the gentleman does, who is a veteran who is 90 years old at this point, and you say is still sharp as a tack. That's fascinating. But basically, he is looking as a student pilot. Of course, they're doing his instrument runs, so he's got this cover across the windshield of his airplane, so he can't see because he has to use his instruments, obviously. And then all of a sudden, some light starts bleeding into the cockpit, white light, and he gets confused and asks his trainer what's going on, and the guy says, "It's not me. Pull off your windshield and see what's going on." And then he looks out and literally sees a cigar-shaped object that's 3 times the length of a battleship. Did he give you any idea how far away this thing was from his airplane?
Both pilots discussed that point apparently during the flight, and they both agreed that the object was approximately a mile off their starboard wing, their right wing, and about 2,000 feet above their altitude.
Oh, my.
And it was an immense object. There are a couple other episodes or aspects to this story that I haven't shared yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, the object moved off to the right, and suddenly, it executed a right-hand turn and moved off and much higher, but it continued to pace the jet, was the impression of both pilots. So it was at a considerable distance and continued to track the airplane or pace the airplane.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting story. The instructor pilot radioed ahead to Nellis Air Force Base what had just occurred, and they were instructed to check in with the intelligence office at Nellis, which they did. And he recounts that both he and the Czech pilot were debriefed for well over an hour. They were forced to sign a secrecy oath about the incident, and it was only then that they were allowed to continue on back to Williams Air Force Base in Mesa, Arizona. But it's a fascinating report, and I will have the raw text of the report on our website within the next several days, I hope.
Oh, this is going to be fascinating. By the way, just a little bit of an input here for both you and Gary. As you know, Peter, I've been involved in this Tic Tac USS Nimitz UFO encounter group as the veterans representative, in some really cool things that they're doing right now. But Commander Fravor, when I spoke with him about the incident, he mentioned that at one point, this Tic Tac UFO was supposedly about 40 feet long, basically. He said it was about the size of his own FA-18 jet, as far as the length of that thing was. He said that he was, at one point, he got within a half mile of this 40-foot object. And that's how he could tell basically how large this thing was. A half mile in an FA-18 is pretty doggone close. But I can't imagine being within 1 mile of a cigar-shaped object tracing along or tracking along with your military airplane that's 3 times as large as a battleship. Can you imagine? That encounter must have been awesome.
Yeah, he was awestruck by it, he says. And he has no explanation for it. He's never had a similar incident, a UFO incident, other than that one. And I wish I could, maybe someday we bring him on the program to allow him to tell his own story. That would be pretty exciting.
Oh, wouldn't that be? Give him an opportunity to really, tell it firsthand. That would be awesome.
Yeah. But I was impressed with this gentleman. He was very serious-minded, sober-minded individual, and he told his story matter-of-factly. There's no doubt in my mind, but what the events as he outlines them actually took place.
And Gary, can you imagine 5 rows of portholes in this thing in a cigar-shaped object? Oh my!
I can't imagine seeing a boat that size that close in an ocean, let alone in the sky. I mean, that would just freak somebody out, because that is just astonishing.
Oh, that is, that has got to be multiple times larger than the Titanic. I don't know how large a normal battleship would be, but I would imagine the Titanic was quite larger maybe than a battleship, but still. If you've talked about 3 lengths of a battleship, that's huge. Like you said, if you're about a mile away from the Titanic, that's a pretty big ship to be sitting in another boat next to. And all of a sudden you're sitting up there at, I don't know, cruising altitude. Do you suppose they're at 30,000 feet or something like that, Peter?
Yeah, probably. That was, in fact, their cruising altitude.
Okay.
So it was 2,000 feet above them. So it was 30,400 feet.
Wow.
Or 32,000 feet above them. Her altitude was 32,000 feet.
Yeah, about the altitude of a commercial airliner today. Let's put it that way. And this is basically over Nellis Air Force. This is over potentially Las Vegas, Nevada, or someplace like that.
Well, I get the impression, and I'll clarify that point before I post the report. I think they had just left Hill Air Force Base near Salt Lake City because they were very near Dugway Proving Ground, which is in Utah.
Ah.
So
yes,
they had he writes in his report that they had just taken off. They'd reached their cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, and that's when all these events occurred.
Gosh, I hate this.
Amazing story.
I pretty much took up this entire half hour talking about one sighting report, but that was amazing. Do you have another quick one we want to go through?
Yeah, I have a couple I'll go through very quickly.
Okay.
Interestingly, just 30 minutes or so before I talked to this gentleman who recounted his incident over Utah, I'd gotten a report from a commercial pilot up in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska, who is equally impressive as the senior officer I'd talked to. And this pilot from Alaska reports that on the 24th of October last year, and then interestingly, again on the 9th of April this year, he had 2 interesting sightings in the vicinity of Mount Shil-Sheldon, I think it's called, on Unimak Island. This is about 650 miles southwest of Anchorage at the end of the Aleutian Peninsula. And in the first incident, October of last year, he was flying along and he saw a metallic-looking sphere ahead of his aircraft as he flew to the southwest. And this, I don't know the story entirely well. I might have to clarify a few points in future programs here, but the sphere approached Mount Shil-Sheldon, which is an active volcano, on Unimac Island, and